let's go ahead and get everything set up. So we're going to be doing a setup process that looks pretty similar to what we did in the level 1 section. In fact, you can actually basically reuse every single thing that you used for environment variables in the previous section. I do recommend getting the reps in here. If you're somebody who builds a lot of AI coding agents, and especially as you get more proficient with this, you're going to find yourself probably building a lot of GitHub apps as I do. So I think just getting in the habit of doing this over and over again can kind of, this is standard repetition learning stuff. So I do recommend following along with this, especially because we're going to talk a little bit about using Anthropic models, which is previously we have just been using OpenAI models. We'll talk a little bit about the difference there. But first things first, you're going to need to go to the project repo link. We'll have that below for you. Obviously, this is still private while I'm kind of developing and filming this. We'll have that public repo for you. What you're going to need to do is we're going to go through our typical cloning step, okay? And what we're actually going to do too is we're going to create a new repo. So what I actually need to do here is we're going to go new. Let's create that new repo first so it's all ready to roll. Okay, and I'm just going to call this, what did I call this other one? Level 2. Okay, we'll call this level 2 agent tutorial. Okay, then I know for my own purposes that it is a tutorial. You're probably going to want to make that private so you can test that in private. And then you're going to want to click create. And once you get to this page, as usual, we're going to go back. We're going to hit the green code button here. We're going to grab the clone URL here. We're going to copy that to our clipboard. I have my terminal opened here. And what we're going to do is we're going to get this code downloaded onto our machine. So I'm going to run git clone. Make sure I spell that right. Git clone. Paste that URL in, and I'm going to call this level 2 agent tutorial, just like I just did with that new repository. And this is going to clone all of that code into that folder. I'm going to change directory via my command line here into that project and open it up in Cursor. And let me go pull this in. I think it opened on one of my other monitors. I have a lot of monitors, you guys. So we now have all of our code open here inside of Cursor. Now we need to do a few things. So I'm going to continue to use the terminal in Cursor, just like I always do. The first command we're going to need to run is npm I. Okay, npm install. We're going to install all of those beautiful packages that we have in our package.json. We're going to get all that stuff set up. Okay, and once you have that, the next thing that we're going to need to do is we obviously need to add our environment variables. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file in the root, the base of our project called .env.local. We're going to go grab all of these values from our .env.example file, and we are going to paste those into the local file that we just created. Okay, so let's talk about some of the changes here from level 1 to level 2 here. So you'll see we still need that SME proxy URL. We still need those same 3 values for our GitHub app. We still need our OpenAI API key, but we have 2 changes here. Okay, so we have the ability now to use Anthropic with Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and we also have the ability to, in our environment variable, set which model that we want to use. So instead of having to do this in a nasty way inside of the code, all you have to do here, if you want to use Anthropic, is type Anthropic and make sure you save. Okay, and of course you'll have to have a key there, which we'll get to in just a second. But that's how you switch between those 2 models. So assuming you do have API keys for each one of those, you can switch back and forth between OpenAI and Anthropic. And that will either use Claude 3.5 Sonnet or O1. And obviously you can play around with the different models here. There's actually a file called llm.ts. One of the things that we did for you guys too, which we'll talk more once we get to the project, because we're not going to write literally every single line of code or we'd be here like all week for this project. We really just want to like give you guys the tools to go in there, and we'll write, of course, some of it. This is actually some of the feedback we got from level 1 already, was that it was a little too much just sitting there watching me write code, and maybe not enough instruction. So if you do have feedback on this, please, again, email feedback@takeoffai.org. This is one of the biggest ways you guys can help us and influence how we do content. This is one of the trickiest things that we do, is trying to figure out how much of writing code from scratch do you want to see versus how much do you want us to focus on conceptual stuff. And while we still, of course, will provide all of the code, maybe doing a little bit of copying and pasting here and there just to speed some of the more mundane boilerplate stuff up, which I think sounds like, based on the feedback we've gotten so far from level 1's project, it sounds like you want us to go a little bit more towards less of writing literally everything from scratch. So we're trying to strike the balance there. So if you have feedback there, super helpful. But the point is, we do have this llm.ts file where you can change the default model if you want to play around with new models. If new models come out in the future that are past the point of recording, I think O3 Mini is supposed to come out any day. So if you want to try O3 Mini out, maybe that's out and you want to go try that or whatever, feel free to. This is the file for that. We'll talk more about that in the project section. What matters right now is we need to go get all of the environment variables here. I'm going to show you how to do that again. Again, I think the practice is helpful. And one of the things that of course, I say every time we touch envs is make sure that you treat these values like they're passwords. Don't share these with people. If people get access, with these keys, they can use your API credits, they can rack up a bill, they can get access to your GitHub app, all that kind of stuff. So just always treat environment variables like passwords. We want to make sure that everybody who starts building AI agents is familiar with the best security practices here. So I'm going to show you my values, but that's because I'm teaching, and that's because before I ship this video, I will delete all of them. Okay, so that's, if you see me doing that, sometimes I always delete the keys. It's just part of teaching. And I'm up to speed on best practices here. So sometimes we get people who worry about me doing this, especially if these videos end up on X or something. Appreciate all of you guys, but I got everything covered here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. I'm actually going to generate these two keys off camera just because it exposes a couple of pieces of information, but we'll have the links to get your OpenAI key here and your Anthropic API key on Anthropic's Workbench here. You can click the Get API keys, and the process is very simple here. Once you have each one of those values, okay, you're going to want to paste whatever those values are here in full, and you'll be ready to go. Again, I'll do those two values actually off camera. You're going to want to pick your LLM provider. So we're actually going to do Anthropic just to switch things up. Obviously, in the previous video and for many videos, we use OpenAI models just because they tend to be a little bit easier to set up sometimes. But we do absolutely love Claude 3.5 Sonnet. That is my model of choice as of recording this video in Cursor. It's a beautiful model, and we're going to demonstrate how awesome that model is here and show how we can get really high quality responses at much cheaper and faster prices than the current pricing of O1. And then let's actually go get this stuff for GitHub app setup. Okay, so this is obviously probably the trickiest part of this just because there's a lot of different things. So this is going to look pretty much identical to what we did in level 1, but we're just going to do it again. So you need to go to github.com/settings/apps. We'll have the link for you. And you need to create a new GitHub app. We're going to do a bunch of stuff here. So let's just call this level 2 coding agent tutorial. And I'm just going to put a bunch of numbers here just randomly. The homepage URL is going to be http localhost //localhost 3000. Okay, we're going to be running on port 3000. The next thing that we need to do is we actually need to go paste our webhook URL. Okay, so remember we used SME for this, so you're going to want to go to sme.io, start a new channel, and you're going to get a SME webhook proxy URL. This is how we're handling the webhook connections. You're going to paste that right in there, and you're also going to want to go into your environment variables and paste that right there as that value. Okay, that's how we're going to be running our SME and pointing our GitHub webhooks to our local host. Okay, we're going to kind of use the tunneling features there to get around that issue. Okay, the next thing that we need is we need to select repository permissions. So we're going to need access to content. So if you scroll down to contents, we're going to want read and write access there. Metadata is already turned on, read only by default, and you want pull requests, you want read and write as well. Okay, then we also need to subscribe to events, right? This is what subscribes to those webhooks. Okay, and we want to subscribe to pull requests. You'll remember we're listening to pull request open events, right? If we go to our handy little flowchart here, we have pull request open events. That's what we want to listen to. Beautiful. So we can scroll down here. Only install this on your account just to keep this nice and private for you. Okay, it looks like we're getting a 34 character thing. Let me let me shorten that up a little bit. Awesome. Okay, so we need to start grabbing a few pieces of information here. We got to grab our app ID here. You're going to paste that in GH app ID. Okay, GH obviously just stands for GitHub. We did change the name of the value from level 1. That's a small thing worth noting there. And what we're also going to need to do is we're going to need to scroll down here. We're going to generate a private key. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to open this up. I'm going to open this up with my text editor. So you just need to open this up in any old text editor here. You're going to copy the value in between these lines here. Again, keep this very secret. You don't want to expose this to people. And you're going to want to paste this right between these two new line characters. So you're going to want to paste it right there. This is very particular. If you get this wrong, it will error out. So just be really careful about that one. Okay, so that step is done. Let's close that out. And we now want to go actually install this. So what you're going to want to do now is on the left side here, you'll see install app. And we actually want to install this on, we don't want to install this on all repos. We want to install this on select repositories. And you're going to want to install this only on whatever repo you're working on. So I think I had, what was this, Level Agent 2 tutorial. So we're going to install this only on this repository so that we don't listen to open pull requests on every single one of our repos. Very important. You're not going to want this to fire everywhere. Remember how I was talking about you can easily make mistakes with AI agents and rack up huge costs? This is one of them, because if you're somebody like me and you have all these side projects you're working on, you don't want this agent firing on all the side projects. You only want it to fire on the one that you are currently testing on. And so once you get this installed in the URL here, you're going to copy this last number, and this is going to be your installation ID. You're going to paste that, and then you will have all your values. So what I'm going to do really quickly here is I'm going to go grab my OpenAI variable, and I will cut to the next step. So I successfully pasted in my OpenAI and Anthropic environment variables in there. And now we're all set on our ENVs. So the next thing that we're going to need to do is you need to go to your repository here. We actually got to get the code that we wrote over here pushed to the new repo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go git remote rename origin upstream. What this is just going to do on my end is going to make sure I don't push this code to the old code base. Okay, so you'll see this is now referred to as the upstream. Okay, and what we want to do is you'll see we have this git remote add origin. Okay, so now I want this to be my origin. I'm going to copy and paste that into my terminal. Okay, now if I actually run that same remote, you'll see we now have this pointing to the right place, so that if I do git origin push, okay, so what we want to do is copy these next two lines, which is we're just going to instantiate a main branch here and push that to origin main, which is just pushing the code to this GitHub repository. And if I refresh, sure enough, you'll see all my code. Okay, and you'll see sure enough with the demo one, this was not incorrectly overwritten. Okay, so that's how if you're cloning things from kind of template repos, that's how you know you're doing things kind of right. So the next thing that we need to do now is we're going to create a new branch, okay, because we actually want to be working off of a developer branch. So I'm going to do this directly within the Cursor UI. I'm just going to call this dev. And what we're going to do is go to the Git tab here. You're more than welcome to use the command line if you prefer this. And then we're going to make sure that this gets pushed to origin, not upstream, origin. And then we'll know that we did that correctly. If we refresh here, we should now see two branches. Awesome. And then if we go back to Cursor, the bottom left, you can see we're on the dev branch. Okay, so that is going to allow us to open pull requests from dev to main. Now, last but not least here, we actually need to go create the labels. So in the intro video, we obviously talked about how labels are the mechanism that we're going to use for manual triggers. So what we need to do is we need to go to the repository settings. Let's see. It's probably easier. If you go to the pull requests tab here, there is a labels tab. So click on labels and we're going to create two labels. So how do we know what labels to create? Well, these are arbitrary values. What we have here is we have our test agent, And then also what we did, we actually converted the review agent from the previous lesson. This is no longer an Express server. We made this an API endpoint. So if you want to go review that code and just see the differences there, it's basically the same code. We just put it in Next.js API format. Functionally, everything's the same there. But you'll see at the top we have review label and we have test generation label. So this is just where we're specifying in our code what we want to call the labels. And it's very important. And you have to make sure that these match what are actually in your GitHub, because what happens is in our code is we basically do an if statement that checks for this exact value. So if you have even like one character off, you'll get errors. And I guarantee you there's at least one of you that's going to run into this. So you have to be really careful when you add these labels. So what I even do is I just go and copy and paste them. Okay, so we're going to create a new label. This is going to be agent-generate-tests. I usually click this 3 times and then I pick the color randomly. Create. And then we're going to do the same thing with review agent. Okay, you can see these files live all together here in this convenient little _lib folder here in our GitHub webhook. And what we're going to do now is copy agent review PR, new label, paste that in, spin this 3 times, create label, and awesome. Now we have both of those labels. So how do we make sure that this is running? So one of the things that we want to point to is we actually have a command in package.json here. And you'll see instead of just npm run dev, which is the typical command, what we actually have is we have the concurrently package installed. This is one of our developer dependencies down here. And this is going to allow us to run our Next.js server along with our GitHub proxy. So this is kind of the same proxy type thing we were doing with SME to run a server that can basically point the webhooks that hit that SME URL and tunnel them to our local host. So if you actually run npm run dev, and instead of just doing dev, if you do :full, okay, so that equates to this command right here, this is actually going to spin both of those up at the same time. And now your server is running and you are ready to test this. So a great way to test this is let's actually go make a change. Okay, so let's say we wanted to go to page here. Let's go to kind of the home page. And let's just say we want to change this to say hello world. Let's make a really basic change. And then we're going to go commit that. Of course, we're on our dev branch. Very important. Make sure you're on dev because you need to make a pull request. And if you're on main, you can't make a pull request to the same branch. That's not how pull requests work. So we're just going to say change main page wording. You know, something simple like that. We're going to commit that. We're going to sync that up. And then what we should be able to do is we should be able to go to pull requests. You can see we even got this helpful little thing right here. And now we're going to create a pull request from dev into main with some sort of a title. This is a single commit PR. So we're just going to use that same commit message. We're going to open this. And if everything is working, you should see the agent say code review in process, right? Remember, our PR review agent that we built in the level 1 section is still working. You can see this worked. Okay. You'll remember I had the Anthropic model enabled from that environment variable. That's why this was so fast. Got us our summary. You can see the summary is, you know, again, the really simple change. So summary doesn't do as much good, but it still proves it's working. And then if we were to go add a label here, you can test each one of those labels. We'll just test the test generation label for now because we kind of proved that the PR one, the PR agent was working. Sure enough, we see AI test generation in progress. You can even go to your code and you can kind of see we have a couple logs. If you want to log more stuff, by the way, feel free to log as much stuff as you want. You can see this is that was the gating step here. You can see that true. That indicates that it is a yes. Right, so that's Boolean logic, and sure enough, we got a test generation. So one thing to show you that I really didn't show you in the intro. So if we click the plus here for a new terminal, if I run npm run test, watch what happens. So actually, I should also point out we have the test command here. You can do your unit tests, your end-to-end tests individually, or you can just run them both at the same time. We won't get super in-depth on the difference between these two in this video, but the point is there's just 2 types of tests. You'll see we actually get a test failed, right? And you can see the test is failing because it's expecting this text, which is what we overrided. And this is the point of having the test generation agent work, right? You can see how it says pull from that branch to see and modify. So let's actually pull. You can see this just changed. Let's run our test suite again with what the agent did. And you'll see all of them now pass. So the agent did in fact correctly take the code that we changed in our pull request and it generated a correct test. So that's everything set up. The next lesson is obviously going to talk about how are we actually doing all of this. That's going to get more into the weeds on all of the stuff that we told you that we teach you. So let's go ahead and move on to that stuff.